I just, did what I thought was best. I don't feel bad for what I did, I feel bad for maybe his family or something. But as far as remorse towards him, no.
But since I lied to him, they spent all that time searching for her.
That was a clip of a man named Phil Snider, and what he didn't know was that at that moment, he was speaking to an undercover police officer who was investigating his missing wife, Roberta. At the ripe age of 73, most folks are settling into their comfy chairs, possibly contemplating the joys of retirement, not plotting sinister deeds. However, Philip's golden years took a dark turn that left many scratching their heads. Phil had originally claimed Roberta had succumbed to cancer during a sentimental journey to Elvis Presley's Graceland, but as the plot thickened, his story underwent several dramatic revisions. It started with an alleged death by choking near Graceland.
My wife passed away. She choked on a phlegm. She'd been choking for quite a year.
Morphed into a mysterious disappearance on an Ohio bridge, and finally culminated in a confession prompted by an undercover operation over cups of coffee.
Did you feel any guilt?
In a way, kinda. I didn't tell anybody.
He confessed to killing his wife with a hammer and disposing of her body along the route to Memphis. Despite his confession, Roberta's remains were never recovered, believed to have ended up in a Kentucky landfill. Philip Snider now serves his time in Ohio, which is a very chilling end to a twisted tale of deceit.
Alright, this one is insane. This guy accidentally confessed to killing 2 women during the filming of an HBO documentary. He'd gone to the bathroom and wasn't aware that his mic was still on. Anyway, context. In 1982, Robert Durst's wife, Kathy, went missing. He told police they'd gotten into an argument before she left their Westchester County home, but 5 days later, he reported her missing. There was no sign of her. And then on Christmas Eve, all the way up until 2000, Durst's friend Susan Berman was found dead in her LA home. Apparently, she had some knowledge of Kathy's disappearance and was going to be speaking with police. Durst was the one responsible for both killings. He also killed his neighbor Morris Black in 2001, which he was immediately arrested for, but he was acquitted because he was able to convince the court that it was in self-defense, even though Black had been found hacked to pieces floating in Galveston Bay. Now, he wasn't arrested for killing his wife and friend until 2015. Although there had always been suspicion that he'd been the one responsible. After finishing up his interview for the HBO docuseries The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, he walked into the bathroom not knowing his mic was still on and started mumbling to himself. And what he mumbled was about as incriminating as it gets.
What the hell did I do? Kill them all. Of course.
Ivan Robert Marko Milat, often called the Backpacker Killer, was an infamous Australian serial killer whose actions stunned the nation. Born in 1944 in a large family, Milat's life took a dark turn very early on. He exhibited disturbing behaviors, including a penchant for violence that escalated into a series of petty crimes and stints in jail. Milat's notoriety stems primarily from the late 80s to the early 90s, when he preyed on unsuspecting backpackers, luring them under the pretense of giving them a lift along the Hume Highway. These encounters tragically ended in the secluded depths of the Belanglo State Forest, where Milat would turn from a seemingly helpful driver into a ruthless killer. His gruesome spree included taking the lives of 2 men and 5 women, but Milat's reign of terror likely extended beyond those confirmed victims. What really tipped the scales towards his capture was an almost accidental confession. In a terrifying encounter, a British backpacker named Paul Onions barely escaped Milat's grasp. This pivotal moment came when Onions, hitchhiking, accepted a ride from him, but as they neared the forest, Milat's demeanor shifted menacingly as he brandished a weapon. In a desperate bid for his life, Onions managed to escape and later provided the police with crucial details about his attacker. While in an interrogation, the police asked Ivan about the suspect wearing gloves, to which he started to explain that he never wore gloves before he realized his slip-up.
William Korzon had been married to his wife Gloria since 1967, and it was a tumultuous relationship to say the least. William was physically violent with Gloria and would often threaten her life. In fact, he was even arrested for threatening to kill her in 67 and spent a bit of time in a mental institution. But when he got out, things didn't get any better. In fact, they got worse. And it all culminated in Gloria going missing in 1981. Gloria's family pretty much knew William had killed her. Police even suspected him of it, but they just didn't have enough physical evidence to put him behind bars. So he got off scot-free for a few decades anyway. In 2019, the case was reopened though, and when investigators contacted Korzon, he immediately asked them, "Did you find the body?" Now, authorities figured there was a very good chance that she was dead, but it was still being treated as a missing persons case. So that question, plus the years of domestic violence, gave police everything they needed to take him into custody, where he finally confessed to killing Gloria way back in 1981.
As we have clearly seen, real criminals occasionally trip up in ways that fiction just cannot beat. But in this case, it might be one of the most shocking. The case of Anthony Garcia, a real-life offender whose love for tattoos turned into his downfall. Back in 2008, Garcia was nabbed during a routine traffic stop, leading to what seemed like an ordinary arrest and mugshot. However, on closer inspection, the police spotted something extraordinary. His chest tattoo was not just any ink, it was a detailed map of a crime that he had committed in 2004. This wasn't just any tattoo, it was an intricate portrayal of a scene where he had taken a life, complete with the location and the exact way the victim had fallen. The ink practically served as a confession on skin, but it didn't end there. An undercover officer managed to get Garcia to spill more details, sealing his fate with his own artwork.
This next guy was so close to getting away with killing his wife, but right when he was about to get up and leave the interrogation room, the investigator managed to get him to talk. So in November of 1981, Evelyn Mackey disappeared from her Florida home. Her husband, Mearl Mackey, told her family that she'd gone to Ohio to care for her sick sister-in-law, but Mearl's story didn't hold up and police became suspicious of him. There were some holes in his story. Unfortunately though, there just wasn't any physical evidence or clear crime scene to explain Laverne's disappearance, and the case went cold for over 3 decades. In 2014 though, the investigation into Laverne's case was reopened. Detectives believed that Laverne hadn't left voluntarily. They came up with a little ruse, fabricating a story about a plane crash in South America, claiming that they might have found Laverne's remains and that Mearl was likely eligible for compensation. This is all to get Mearl into the station to talk, obviously. Now, Mearl maintained that he didn't know where Laverne was, but the detective just kept pressing him. And Mearl was about to get up and leave, but then the detective switched gears. He reframed his questioning, saying that he believed Mearl may have just made a mistake, and he was able to coax Mearl into framing the incident as an accident that he was just too scared to report at the time. Under pressure, Mearl changed his story, claiming Laverne hit her head and fell into the water while they were fishing. He had even admitted to tying an anchor to her body and watching her sink because he thought that she was dead and was afraid to seek help. But Mearl unintentionally revealed more than he intended. He described Laverne's head wound as spurting, suggesting that she was still alive when he disposed of her. Laverne's body was never found, but Mearl pleaded guilty to a lesser charge and was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but he died in 2020 while serving his sentence.
The detectives who conduct interrogations tend to be exceptionally skilled people, and they need to pick up on even the smallest bit of information that could signify that the person in front of them might be being deceitful. And sometimes they don't even need to be super skillful because the guilty party just tells on themselves, even when they didn't mean to. This admission comes from an episode of the A&E show The First 48, when detectives were searching for those responsible for taking the life of Michael Hudson in a drive-by situation. While detectives had their suspect, Eric Edwards, in the interrogation room, he was denying any and all involvement before finally conceding that perhaps he was at the scene of the crime, but that he was just the driver. Detectives, of course, aren't buying this and decide to try and appeal to his human side by bringing up the victim and who he was. This is when Eric slips up.
I know who he is. His brother died 6 months ago.
Sure did.
His name Marko, and the one I shot his name Mike.
Yeah, That sounded like a full-blown confession to me. When the detective dives into what he said again, Eric tries to backtrack, but I think at that point, it was just a little too late.
You said the one I shot. All right. So
No, you said the one I shot.
Jay Rothe, one little slip up, and he immediately became a suspect in the death of a woman named Linda Riley. She'd been reported missing by friends in February of 2012. Rothe actually showed up at the police station on his own. He was a friend of Linda's and spoke to police as if he was a concerned friend. Now, at first, police weren't really suspicious of him at all. He seemed genuinely concerned, and he was open with police, but then he made a mistake. The detective asked him at one point, "Do you think that maybe she just left?" And Rothe said, "No, she wouldn't leave without her dogs."
No, she wouldn't leave without her dog.
So it was at this point that Rothe immediately became a suspect. He'd said that with a lot of confidence. It was clear that he knew her dogs were still in the house and that it was just her that was missing, but how would he have known that? Police then started questioning what kind of relationship Rothe had with Linda. They'd been friends who would occasionally hook up, according to Rothe, but over the course of the next few days, other friends of Linda would say that she'd started becoming fearful of Rothe, who seemed to want to have this control over her. He'd also get violent with her on occasion. Well, authorities asked Rothe if he'd do a polygraph test. He agreed, failed the test miserably, and finally confessed to having killed Linda, having hit her in an argument where she then fell down, hitting her head. Unfortunately, she never woke up.
In his twilight hours, James Brewer thought he was at death's door. Lying in his bed, a stroke rendering him painfully aware of his mortality, he decided it was time to unburden his soul from a secret that had haunted him for over 3 decades. Back in 1977, Brewer had found himself cuffed and questioned for a crime of passion, a fatal crime fueled by jealousy in Tennessee. But instead of facing the music, he bolted. With his wife, he slipped away to Oklahoma, adopting new identities and starting afresh. Fast forward to what Brewer believed were his final moments, he picked up the phone and confessed to the crime, hoping to clear his conscience before meeting his maker. Ironically, fate had other plans. Brewer survived. Now, instead of preparing for the afterlife, he was preparing for a courtroom drama, facing a trial for the 32-year-old crime. After being caught for the crimes, Brewer held a garage sale, sold everything, and with his wife drove back to Tennessee to turn himself in. There, he faced the possibility of the death penalty, which was a stark turnaround for someone who thought that he was on his way out.
Finally, we have a story I'm going to call the butt dial. Butt dials. One of the most embarrassing things you can do on your phone, not quite as bad as looking at someone's story on Instagram and seeing it was posted 16 seconds ago and immediately feeling like a creep, but still bad. But, pun intended, this may be the most unlucky butt dial in history. Or luckiest, depending on how you look at it. It all happened in Roswell, New Mexico. 2 people were arrested after unintentionally dialing 911 and discussing their crime on the phone. Aaron Burrell and Yvonne Thyberg were driving away after stealing a TV from a house when Burrell's phone accidentally called the police. The 911 dispatchers listened in on the conversation for nearly 45 minutes as the suspects openly talked about their crime. At one point, one of them even said, "We basically robbed them, dude." And then another was like, "We got away safe and clean." And you can't make this up, as the two are revealing all the details of their crime. They were listening to Bon Jovi's Wanted Dead or Alive. Just cherry on top.
It was crazy. I just can't believe how easy it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the moral of the story is don't commit crimes.
Yeah, or you'll go to jail.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, I've been one of your hosts today, Olivia Kozlowski.
I've been your host, James.
Bye.
Catch you next time.